Hey, everybody. Happy Saturday night. I'm Anjanette Levy, and welcome to my channel. We're doing a super casual Saturday night here. I hope you are staying cool wherever you are. If this is your first time visiting the channel, thank you so much and welcome. If you are a returning viewer, thanks for coming and coming back. I really appreciate it. And if you're watching on replay, thank you so much for watching on replay. I love it when I see the replay viewers. It's amazing because I know not everybody can watch live every time. And so it's a really great thing whenever anybody can come back and watch on replay. So we have a lot to talk about tonight, a lot to talk about. And please, you know the drill if you've been here before, but I'll repeat it for those of you who may be new to the channel. Please hit the subscribe button. That's really important. Also hit that thumbs up, the like. It helps the video in the YouTube universe, which is the algorithm that helps push it out into the YouTube universe. And that is very helpful for the video in the channel. And we're trying to grow the channel here. We've grown it slowly but surely over the last many months, and it's all thanks to all of you showing your support. And I really, really appreciate it. And thank you to the mods. The mods are all here tonight at the docket. Monana, Melmac, Monty, everybody is here tonight. If I missed anybody, I apologize. But thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Guys, we have a lot to talk about. If you have questions, drop them in the chat. And also, if you are just joining, let me know where you're watching from. City, state, country. I've seen some new countries in the chat lately, and I love going back and looking through the comments. I try to read all of them and respond in some way, shape, or form. And, you know, I love seeing where everybody's watching from because we get a lot of viewers from overseas, in the UK, Australia, Estonia, I saw today, Belgium, also just across the country, which is really exciting for me too. We've got some new documents that have come out, guys, and they're, you know, it is like a fire hose. It's like drinking from a fire hose. It really is. There's a lot in there. These are very detailed reports that the Idaho State Police wrote, and they're very interesting. I haven't gotten through all of them, but I've had some help reading through some of them. And tonight I felt like, you know, we touched on last night a little bit of Dylan Mortenson's interview with some of the Idaho State Police detectives in the days after the homicides. And we kind of went through that a little bit. And then my son came in the room and started putting his stuffed dog up and stuff. And so I had to kind of wrap things up because I can't have that. And it's just not, we're not going to do that. So I had to wrap things up. But we have learned some interesting things from these documents about Bryan Kohberger and the major red flags that people were seeing at Washington State University in the weeks leading up to the homicides. Now, I am in no way, shape, or form saying that anybody could have foretold what happened or what was going to happen. You know, it sounds like at least one professor thought he was going to be a predator and felt that he was a predator. But I don't think anybody could have ever said, oh my God, this guy is going to go out and commit, you know, a mass murder. But some of the things we're reading in these documents obviously show a clear animus toward women. That is very clear. And a lot of people will say, well, you know, he doesn't pick up on social cues. He has level 1 autism. And that could very well be true. He may not pick up on social cues. And I don't ever want anybody to think or think that we're saying it, or that I am saying that Bryan Kohberger's level 1 autism, you know, just because he has level 1 autism, okay. You know, a lot of people have level 1 autism. A lot of people are on the spectrum. They don't kill people. They don't obsess about serial killers. They don't obsess about sexual burglary crimes. I think people who are getting upset about this being brought up, like the defense brought that up and put that out there in an effort to get the death penalty stricken. It didn't work. Judge Hibbler didn't buy it. It wasn't a legal reason. It wasn't a reason under the law to strike the death penalty. So when I see these comments about people getting really upset about, well, you're saying that his autism, you're kind of conflating that with his criminal behavior. I'm not. Yeah, the guy may be socially awkward, but so are sociopaths. A lot of sociopaths are socially awkward. And so I think that we need to just kind of, that his level 1 autism may explain some of his behaviors, but it certainly doesn't explain this. And so I think we just kind of need to separate all of that and quit worrying about it. There are many people who have the autism diagnosis who are on the spectrum who are sweet, kind, gentle, wonderful people. And so I think we just need to put that to bed. Before we dive into these documents and some of the things we're reading, I think we need to take some time to acknowledge the victims in this case. They are being overshadowed by the new information that is coming out. I did not do this last night, but I want to acknowledge the people that matter here. And they are Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, Ethan, Dylan, and Bethany. These are the victims here and the survivors. And so we need to remember them and why they should have had many more photos like this to take. So I just want to say that. I really want to put that out there right now before we dig into this, because what we're going to dig into is very serious and very disturbing. And one person's mess up here shattered this. One person's mess up here, sickness. And that's what it is. Sickness. You will recall that when he was being sentenced and he was called evil, and one of the parents, Maddie's stepfather, Scott Laramie, said there was evil that needed to be locked away. He nodded affirmatively. He knows. He knows what he is. He knows. And he would have done it again, I'm convinced, if he thought he could have gotten away with it. So let's look into some of these reports. The first report I want to look at is from an inmate. They interviewed an inmate who was at a prison in Idaho. But he had been in the Latah County Jail with Bryan Kohberger. So I found this to be very interesting. And I want to thank everybody for being here. We've got a lot of people in the chat, and I'm going to work to, I think the chat's getting a little overwhelmed, so I'm going to try to slow this down really quickly so everybody gets a chance to say what they want to say. if I can remember how to do it. But this first thing, guys, is from this. It's from a inmate who had served time with Bryan Kohberger. This inmate could not remember the exact date, but he believed that Bryan Kohberger had been placed in their pod a few days after New Year's Day. After arriving in their pod, Kohberger immediately sat down and watched the news about his arrest, watching multiple channels that were covering the story. Kohberger said, "Wow, I'm on every channel." Kohberger was very quiet, and it was very awkward having him in the pod. Kohberger was highly intelligent and analytical, always trying to figure out what you were doing, but didn't know common knowledge things, i.e., the difference between two muscle cars. Kohberger's eyes were creepy, I guess, but other than that, he seemed like a pretty normal guy. He didn't talk to Kohberger very much, but when he did, their conversation was casual small talk, never about Kohberger's case. Bryan Kohberger's smart enough to know that he shouldn't be talking about his case in the county jail. And I'm sure Ann Taylor told him not to do that. Kohberger would use 3 standard-sized bars of soap per week due to his hour-long showers and excessive hand washing. Kohberger's hands were red from the amount of hand washing. Kohberger told him his favorite movie was American Psycho with Christian Bale. At around 1:28 p.m., Detective Schwecke and I interviewed the inmate regarding his interactions with Kohberger. What follows is not intended to be an exact transcript. They're saying refer to the interview. He was housed with Kohberger from early January to February 15th, 2023, and Kohberger enjoyed watching the news about his case unless it began talking about his family or friends, at which point he'd changed the channel immediately. He wants to hear about himself. He doesn't want to hear about his family or friends. As time continued, Kohberger stopped watching the news related to his case almost completely. Kohberger analyzed everything. He wanted to know why people had preferences on anything. He psychoanalyzes everything. They talked about his case sometimes, but never Kohberger's case. Kohberger spent most of his time on the communication tablet talking with people, typically his mother. We know that's mom, who he told to retain an attorney after he had seen blank on the news. Kohberger washed his hands excessively, used 3 bars of soap per week, which caused his hands to always be red. He showered every day and wanted new bedding and clothes every day. Kohberger was very smart and easy to get along with, but was hard to talk to because he talked over him due to Kohberger's vocabulary and topics of conversation. Kohberger also talked about his education a lot. Kohberger loved baseball, with the Yankees being his favorite team. Kohberger also liked to watch court TV and was very interested in the Murdaugh trial, the Alec Murdaugh trial. So he was watching Alec Murdaugh's trial, probably trying to get some pointers. Alec Murdaugh, of course, was a lawyer who testified in his own defense. Also had very good lawyers. So he's watching the Murdaugh trial. So there you have it. What do you guys think of that? I find this to be very interesting, you guys. I thought you would find that very interesting. I'm going to look at some of the comments here. Thank you so much, Didi Fuentes, for the super sticker. Nikki, thank you so much for the super sticker. I appreciate it. Oh, the Off the White Lotus. Thank you so much for the super sticker. It's very sweet of you. Thank you so much. I'm looking at your comments, guys, to see if anybody has anything to say about what Bryan Kohberger was doing in the jail. We knew he was a clean freak and everything. We heard about that. But this is really something else that we're hearing about, with him really loving watching himself on the news. Psychosaurus Rex is in the house. She says, I literally do this diagnostic stuff for work. No, it isn't. Psychopathy is not a diagnosis. Sociopathy is just antisocial personality disorder. Yes, but psychopathy is not antisocial personality disorder nor a diagnosis. Interesting. Yes. I've heard the same thing. So that's what one of the inmates in the jail said. We're going to move on now to some of the things the students at WSU said. And one of the things, and I'm trying to adjust the chat here, guys, so we're not going as fast, but one of the things that a lot of the students said in the interviews, like, well, actually, I should go back. Ann Taylor in court, she was very concerned about interviews with students at Washington State University coming into court as evidence. She was very concerned about this. I remember at one of the pretrial hearings in March, she was freaking out because she was worried that basically she was worried that these interviews would come in and make Bryan Kohberger look really bad. And I remember I almost pulled up the soundbite to play it for you guys tonight. She said, there are literally hundreds of hours of interviews with people on the Washington State University campus who had really unkind things. This is what she said. They had unkind things to say about Mr. Kohberger. And she was really, really concerned about these things coming into evidence and possibly being used in the penalty phase. Jeff Nye, the prosecutor for the one of the prosecutors, he worked for the Idaho Attorney General's office. He gets up and he said, don't worry, we're not planning to use any of those interviews because if this gets to the penalty phase, we have way better aggravating evidence against Mr. Kohberger than interviews from Washington State University students. And Bryan Kohberger's face was kind of like, so she was really concerned about these interviews. And I think she had a reason to be concerned about these interviews, just as she had reason to be concerned about the lion's share of the evidence in this case. Think about it. She had the DNA to contend with, the DNA on the knife sheath, which was going to be incredibly difficult for them to challenge. They were going to have to say it was planted. Somebody planted the sheath because they had him basically having the sheath, that he bought a K-bar knife, sheath, and sharpener in March of 2022. He travels across the country, moves to Pullman, Washington, and his DNA is found on the inner snap of the knife sheath, the female part of the snap of the knife sheath. So they've got that to contend with, coupled with a white sedan that the FBI identified as a Hyundai Elantra circling the area. His cell phone being off for a 2-hour time period, covering the period of the murders, him conceding he was out driving around that night. That was his so-called alibi. Plus all the electronic evidence we're learning about now, the internet searches for serial killers, all this stuff. I mean, there was so much she had to contend with. I mean, she had to go up against a mountain of circumstantial evidence in this case, plus all the visits to the general area, the King Road coverage area with the cell phone, the 23 visits late at night. It's a lot. When you're a defense attorney, that's a lot. The knife sheath alone with the DNA on it, I don't know how they were going to battle that, except they were going to try to say it was either planted or transfer DNA. like double, triple transfer based on all the stuff we read, all the court filings. So let's take a look at a few of these reports where they interviewed Washington State University students. We're going to page 467. Actually, we're going to 466 in the reports. And again, this has been a lot of reading. And I'll stick around too, because I want to tell you about some stuff that I've seen reported that I think is not correct. So I'll get to that. I meant to say this earlier, but here we go. Okay, so this is a professor. And I think I know which professor this is that they interviewed, but I'm not 100% sure. This professor knew that Kohberger was going to be one of his blanks in June or July of 2022. He didn't meet Kohberger in person until August. Kohberger was an incoming PhD student in the department, and he knew Kohberger was from a small private school back east. Blank said Kohberger seemed sharp and personable enough when he first met him. Blank had not read Kohberger's master's dissertation. Blank had no part in Kohberger's acceptance to the PhD program, or that he was going to be assigned Kohberger as a blank teaching assistant, I assume is what this says. I asked Blank about a couple of incidents of unprofessional behavior associated with Kohberger that I had read in a letter from the faculty advising Kohberger that he lost his TA position. Blank said the first incident that occurred with Mr. Kohberger was a time when Blank was in his office and wanting to leave to go home. This was on Friday. Mr. Kohberger showed up at the end of the day and wanted to talk. Blank said it was pretty clear that he wanted to leave and that Kohberger wanted to talk. Blank said this was not the first time that this happened with Kohberger, where he would just show up late in the day and want to talk. Blank said this behavior had bothered him for a while. He said he would typically have his 40 hours in by the end of Thursday, and he didn't really want to talk about anything on Fridays. He wanted to get out of there. He's like, I'm done. It's Friday. I want to leave. Blank said, when he was asking, the cops were like, well, what did Kohberger want to talk about? And Blank said nothing in particular, and that there was nothing remarkable about any of these conversations. Blank said some of the subjects that were discussed in the past involved how to brief a case or how to deal with plagiarism. Interesting, given that Kohberger would probably have to write a thesis. Or also just general recreation activities on the Palouse. After 10 to 20 minutes, there was an exchange that perturbed Blank, where Kohberger wouldn't get to the point and let Blank go home. At one point, Kohberger told Blank that he was snarky. Blank would become tired and frustrated, and he told Kohberger to leave his office, and he did not. Blank got up and walked out of his office. He said Kohberger followed him out of his office and continued talking to him. He said he walked down the hall to the main office where he knew Kohberger had some run-ins with others. After several late afternoon evening encounters, Blank wasn't sure if Kohberger was trying to curry favor or whether he was trying to control Blank's time. At some point, Blank concluded that Kohberger was power tripping. How about this? And by using Blank's time and preventing him from leaving his office, it was a way of controlling him. So he's thinking that Kohberger is trying to exercise control over him by just coming in and talking to him about nonsense at the end of a long work week, like exercising some form of control over him. And this is a professor. I think this could be Professor Snyder, but I don't know that 100%. But this could be Professor Snyder. who did have some run-ins with Bryan Kohberger. Blank advised that he has had over 8 blanks in the past, and he's never had a problem with any of them. He talked about Kohberger walking and talking with him as Blank walked to his car, and he remembered Kohberger bragging about outsmarting the parking regulations on campus. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah, it's just parking on campus, but this is somebody who's like in the criminal justice program, supposed to be pro law enforcement, following the rules, yet he's trying to get over on the parking thing on campus where you're a TA and you're essentially getting free school. Why? Silly. Blank talked about difficulty in getting Kohberger to complete his tasks as a teaching assistant. Blank said he had been advised by department higher-ups to be more direct in making his expectations clear to Kohberger. This is very interesting because it makes you wonder how invested, if Bryan Kohberger wasn't completing his tasks as a teaching assistant, how invested was he really in his field of study and in becoming a professor? Was this all just a cover? Was the whole "I'm going to be Professor Kohberger"? This makes me wonder, was this a cover? Was this a way to move across the country because you're going to move away from home and commit murders? We know this is something he was fantasizing about a lot. And it's going to bring me back to Ted Bundy. We're going to get to Ted Bundy here very, very shortly. Blank advised Kohberger's behavior didn't really change from the time before the homicides or after the homicides. He said he never received any direct complaints about Kohberger interacting with any of the undergraduate students in his capacity as a teaching assistant. He further advised the female grad students didn't like Kohberger because he was that off-putting. He said we should talk to a female front office staffer who was an undergrad student working on a work study program who'd made complaints about Kohberger's behavior. Blank advised that he had secondhand information that he had made several of the female PhD students uncomfortable because of interactions they had with him. I asked Blank about which grad students we may want to interview that have had a problem with Mr. Kohberger, and they advised that there were 2 students from blank. He said they were fellow PhD students named blank, last name not said, later identified as whomever. I asked Blank if he ever socialized with Kohberger, and he advised that he had attended a mixer at the wherever where 20 to 25 people from the department attended, and he was accompanied by his wife, the professor was, and he recalled nothing unusual during that mixer. Blank talked about the process by which Kohberger's behavior eventually led to his removal as a teaching assistant. He advised he initially supported Kohberger until after a second event that Blank could not remember the details of. He advised Kohberger's removal was as a result of a cumulative effect of his behavior. So it was like all these different things, probably not completing his tasks and then the complaints. Plus he had run-ins with faculty. I know for a fact, like one of them was Professor Snyder. So maybe this was not Professor Snyder. Maybe it was another professor. We can probably figure it out if we go back and it lists this guy's experience. And so we can probably figure it out who it is, despite the redactions. After the homicides, Blank said he did consider the possibility that Kohberger had committed the murders. Blank characterized this, though, as a fleeting thought. Can you imagine? You're like, oh, I wonder if Bryan Kohberger killed those students over in Moscow. But it's like a fleeting thought. Yikes. Blank considered Kohberger's power tripping / controlling tendencies, in addition to being socially challenged. And this is interesting because this kind of brings me back to, if you guys watched last night, and I know it was kind of like a brief live, and I played the interview with Heather and Jared Barnhart. This kind of makes me wonder, like, it goes back to his relationship with his parents, and how Heather and Jared Barnhart, the Cellmate experts, said that he would start calling them first thing in the morning at like 5 a.m. Pacific time, 8 a.m. Eastern time. They would literally tuck him into bed at night. He's texting, like, if he can't get a hold of one parent, he's texting the other. He's calling them throughout the day. Is he trying to control his parents' time and monopolize his parents' time by calling them like that? Like, demanding their attention. Is that what that is? Was him demanding asking his dad to come out to Washington State to help him drive back, get that Elantra, get that thing out of the area. Probably needed help driving. Can't do that whole drive by himself. It's a long drive. But was that a way to, in some way, to control his dad? Like, no, I need you to come out here. You need to fly out here. You need to come out here and help me drive this car back. So this is a guy who's losing control. According to this guy, this guy thinks he's a control freak. And Bryan Kohberger, probably in October, early November, he's losing control. He has no control over his situation at Washington State University. None. He has no control over it. Just my thought. This professor advised that Kohberger had alienated and irritated several female PhD students, as well as at least one female professor, with his behavior. He said Kohberger never discussed knives or edged weapons. We asked blank about a survey Kohberger had conducted with persons who had committed crimes. This professor was not aware of this and said that we should contact some staffer about Kohberger's PhD activities. He talked about a conversation he had with Kohberger early on, where they discussed the idea of sexual harassment. Blank knew that Kohberger had alienated himself from the female grad students by this time. This included 6 or 7 women. Kohberger came up with a line of thought where he said, what if Kohberger had heard about blank behaving inappropriately with women, and what would blank do to defend himself against a false allegation? Blank found this line of thought to be troubling and thought Kohberger was trying to put himself in a position of power. Blank said he did not remember any physical injuries visible on Kohberger after the homicides occurred. They then followed up and spoke, it seems, with this person again by phone. He said he considered the issue about whether Kohberger was power tripping or just socially inept. Could be both, could be one or the other. But I would say he's probably both. More so control freak, but also socially inept. I mean, I think we know he's probably socially inept. He's, the formal manner of speaking, all of that stuff. But other professors had said, like Dr. Ramsland in an interview said he was always very kind and grateful. But he was in a subservient position to her. She was the expert. She's the professor. He was the student. In this role as a teaching assistant, he has like a position of authority. Could you imagine him as a cop? Like Bryan Kohberger as a cop? Really? Oh my God. Yikes. Wow. Oh, I'm so sorry. We've moved on to a female. I apologize. It appears that this is. Oh, this was. I'm so sorry. They're talking about a female staffer he was referring to. I apologize. Okay. It appears this person is saying as well that Kohberger may have fibbed about where he lived, because the person, he's saying, oh, he indicated to me he lived in this place, but really he lived in this place that I'm seeing on the news. So this is interesting. What do you guys think about this? Oh, we've got a lot of people. That was very kind. People have gifted memberships. It's very sweet. So I'm wondering what you guys think of all of this. Oh, we have 3,000 people watching. That's quite a bit. Thanks, guys. That's amazing. Edward Wood says, I was at the University of Florida the semester before Rowling committed those horrible crimes. Way before cell phones or internet, he used a K-bar knife and went through the sliding glass doors. Very similar. I agree. We talked about that last night. And thank you for the super chat, Edward Wood. We talked about Danny Rowling last night. And Danny Rowling is one of the serial killers that he had been searching on his phone. And Danny Rowling murdered some students at the University of Florida in 1990 over a period of days. And he is a very similar, it's almost like Bryan Kohberger was a copycat of Danny Rowling, but also of Ted Bundy. Oh, this is very sweet. Sarah Reesness, thank you for the super chat. She says, so excited for your channel coming in from Southern California. Thank you. It's very sweet of you. Thank you, Sarah. Aaron Claggett, thank you for the super sticker. So guys, I'm seeing that, you know, Bryan Kohberger had issues with control. And I kind of said this on Crime Fix before. I've said this before, that I felt like this was somebody who was a control freak. And I think throughout his, I could kind of read it in his, the way his defense attorneys were kind of acting in court. Like, I could tell he was probably a pain to them. Like, he was difficult for them to deal with. They were basically saying that they were blaming it on his autism. I'm not so sure, that may have been part of it, but I doubt it. He probably thought that he knew how to defend himself better than they did. That's my guess. I'm just, but some of this stuff that I'm reading, it's really off-putting and really disturbing. If you're just joining us, thank you so much for joining us. And please remember to give the thumbs up, hit that like button, and please subscribe. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. We're trying to grow the channel, and I see we've got some new members joining, which is really cool. Thank you so much. And we will acknowledge those with some shout outs here toward the end. But we're going to keep on moving through these reports because there's a lot to get through. We're not going to get through it all tonight. I may do some standalone videos on this where I kind of do the highlights, But some of this stuff that I'm reading, it's really been blowing my mind. It's not that shocking, really, given everything that we know, and but it's just the fact that he was such a problem. And I think it was because he had a little bit of power at Washington State University. At DeSales, he was simply a student. He was a student of Dr. Ramsland. He was a student of Dr. Bolger. He was studying there. And he was a little off-putting to people there, some of the students I talked to there. But at the same time, he didn't interact with people that much there. He went to school. He would talk in class a little bit. People thought he was smart. But he'd go to class and then he'd leave. He didn't hang out with the kids for the clubs after school and stuff like that. I mean, he was a commuter student. He would go to class and he would go home. And he didn't have any power. But it seems like every time Bryan Kohberger in his life had a little bit of power, he gets himself into trouble. Like, we still don't know the exact ins and outs of what happened when he was in that Explorer program when he was younger. But we know he got the boot. He got kicked out of the program, the Police Explorer program. So you give this guy a little bit of power and he can't handle it. It's very off-putting and very disturbing. And the whole time, you see this progression with him. So when he's younger, he wants to, it's kind of like, it's very strange. When he's younger, he wants to be a cop when he's younger. So he wants to be a cop when he's younger. That doesn't work out. So then he gets into this criminal justice, criminology stuff. And he tells Gilbertson and Payne after his arrest that at DeSales, he was inspired. Like, they asked him, why are you studying criminology and criminal justice? And he said at DeSales, he was inspired. Well, inspired to do what? And I said this last night. I was invited to be a guest on the interview room, which was very kind of Chris McDonough to invite me. I was a little nervous, actually, being on there. I was like a little nervous because Dr. Gary Bricado was a guest on there. And I was like, he's an expert. Like, so I was a little nervous. But he wanted to be a cop. And that didn't work out for him. So he goes to DeSales, he's studying there, and he becomes inspired. Well, Bryan, were you inspired to study the criminal mind because you really wanted to help society? Or were you inspired because what you were studying, the subject matter and the material, spoke to you? Like, you felt you found your calling. Everything you'd been looking for in your life, something was always missing. You were somebody who could feel nothing. You could do things with little remorse. You said this on your Tapatalk post as a teenager. But then you get into a class where you're talking about people who are committing horrific crimes. And you're inspired. So are you inspired? Was the inspiration not because you want to study the criminal mind because you want to help society? It's because you're inspired because it's speaking to your soul. You figured it out. This is who I am. this is what I want to do. This is who I am. This is what I need. I think that's the inspiration. For as sick as that sounds, it's just, this is my thinking on it, what the inspiration really was. And the whole thing about wanting to work for the Pullman Police Department and the internship to help rural police departments. Rural police departments see very little crime. I'm not saying they can't see crime or have problems with crime, but he wanted to help them analyze data. Like, no, you saw a way to get an in to a police department. You wanted to be a cop. That didn't work. Now you could, like, I'm not convinced that he didn't want to do these things in Pullman. He doesn't get the gig in Pullman, but he gets invited to the pool party in Moscow in July after moving, in late June, early July, it was late June, to Washington State. He goes over there and he's like, there's a lot of pretty girls over here. He didn't get the gig. He interviewed for that Pullman police internship gig in April. He didn't get the gig. But that would have been a perfect cover and a way to get information about a homicide investigation. If you were doing an internship and you had access to data. Now, he probably wouldn't have had access to data about a homicide investigation, but it could have been a good cover for him in his mind. Golden State Killer. He was a cop. Just some things that I've been thinking and have come to mind for me. These are all just my thoughts, guys. And, I've been covering crimes for a long time. I've read a lot, I'm certainly no PhD student in criminology. But I don't think, I've said it, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I don't think Bryan Kohberger's that complex. I don't think he's that smart. He may have a certain degree or level of intelligence. Great. But I don't think he's this bright light that he's been made out to be. I mean, he may be able to go to school and do the work, but I don't think he's like some genius. He's just, he thinks like a criminal. That's all there is to it. All right, let's go on to our next document. I kind of went on to a little bit of an aside there. Somebody else was talking about how he stares at people and he thinks that it's a way of possibly exhibiting dominance. This one student said that we discussed Kohberger's tendency to stare at people. So-and-so thought that the Kohberger did this in a way to display power or dominance. He mentioned a senior named blank blank that complained that Kohberger stared at her a lot in class and made her feel uncomfortable. Blank advised he had not observed any inappropriate behavior from Kohberger aimed at any undergraduate students. He said he thought Kohberger did a good job in correcting poorly written answers, and he had not observed bias or inappropriate tone in grading. One student had made a complaint about this, but blank did not see it. Okay, so now we are getting to more issues about women. Blank said the first time she met Kohberger was with another PhD student named blank. All these redactions make things very difficult. So blank is anything that's redacted. This meeting occurred at the graduate student orientation. Kohberger came up to them and said she instantly had a bad feeling about him. Women in their gut. Women are always told to trust their gut. Blank told blank how she felt, and blank said, give him a chance. Blank said she confronted Kohberger early on about the way he was speaking to women. Blank said she noticed early on that Kohberger did not like people that were not of his demographic. She explained that there are a diverse class of different types of people in their class. On one day, Kohberger was being rude to a deaf student named Blank and said she called him out on how he spoke to her. Blank described how Kohberger's mannerisms also contributed to his rudeness. Blank further described that Kohberger would stare at people in an intimidating way. She said she would avoid sitting next to him in class, and that she told Kohberger the way he was speaking was condescending and that he speaks that way to women, and that it made her uncomfortable. Several of the students supported Blank in her rebuke of Kohberger. Kohberger responded to her by saying, I care how you feel, but you are wrong. So as a TA, that is not how you acknowledge. It sounds like an effort to acknowledge her feelings, but that's not how you do it. You say, I care about how you feel. And I'm sorry if I made you feel that way. I apologize. I'll try to do better. But he told her she was wrong. Since that incident, Blank said she felt she has been targeted by him. Blank became emotional at this point in the interview. She said Kohberger has since paid her a lot more attention. Blank said Kohberger has stood in a way that she couldn't get out of her desk and then started to talk to her. So she felt like he was blocking her from getting out of her desk. Blank said Kohberger would talk to her or talk her into the ground. Sounds like she was being berated by him about how she was wrong about whatever topic he was interested in. Kohberger would also come into her office and stand in the doorway and would not take any cues that she did not want to talk to him. Kohberger would try and talk to her about the Ted Bundy murders because he knew she was interested in true crime. He also name dropped a former professor of his named Blank. Blank admired Blank and wanted to meet her, but not based on her association with Kohberger. We don't know exactly who that was, but we know that obviously Kohberger's most famous former professor is Dr. Catherine Ramsland. Now, from that redaction, it looks like a shorter name. But I mean, maybe in that field, there are a lot of well-known professors from DeSales. I don't know. But Catherine Ramsland is a major serial killer expert. In that field, she would be very well known. Very well known. Blank said she was interested in the fact that since the Moscow murders, some people were comparing them to the Ted Bundy murders that occurred at a college sorority, and that Kohberger wanted to talk about those murders with her. They're talking about the Chi Omega murders in Tallahassee. Kathy Kleiner Rubin survived that attack. I interviewed her at CrimeCon a couple of years ago. What an amazing woman. Ted Bundy clubbed her in the face. And thank God he took off. And she survived. So I want to repeat that to you. I want to repeat that to you one more time. Blank said she was interested in the fact that since the Moscow murders, Some people were comparing them to the Ted Bundy murders that occurred at a college sorority and that Kohberger wanted to talk about those murders with her. Blank said Kohberger studied sexual burglars and their motivations and decision making. So the way this is written, it makes me think that he wanted to talk about the Chi Omega murders. He probably doesn't want to talk about the Moscow murders because he can't do that, because he actually knows something about that. But he can talk about Chi Omega. And then fantasize about what he did in Moscow. So Kohberger studied sexual burglars, their motivations, and decision making. That right there shows you we know what his motive was. And I've said this before, and people come down on me about this, but this was a sexually motivated crime. It just didn't go according to his sick plan. The Blank told Blank to start keeping track of Kohberger's behavior toward her. Blank made an informal report to the Blank, but she didn't like the way that they responded because she felt they could not adequately protect her from retaliation. She continued to report her experiences to the Blank, as well as the Blank, the program chair, and other professors about feeling safe. She said she recently wrote in a graduate questionnaire that she continued to feel targeted and didn't know how to handle the situation. Blank said they were required a discrimination training because of things Kohberger had said unofficially. So this person has a disability, right? Kohberger then asked this person if she would be comfortable procreating, having children, given the fact that she had a disability. Blank said she started keeping track of how often he was late to class. Blank said she kept track of the number of times that Kohberger aggressively stared at her during class. In one class, she said he stared at her 9 times, and she described instances of Kohberger following her after class multiple times, and she said Kohberger always seemed to want to be in the general area of her and others in the program that did not want to have anything to do with him. Blank talked about Blank's student, Blank female named Blank, who recently had her apartment broken into. I'm pretty sure that's the woman he was friends with, possibly. I could be wrong about that. The Asian woman that they talked about on Dateline, but I could be wrong. I mean, it's redacted, so it's really hard to tell who this is. Blank said Kohberger took an interest in her. She said the reason this Blank and the other Blank talked to Kohberger was because they had difficulty understanding English, and they seemed to be the only ones that would continue to talk with Kohberger. So he's like a pariah. He's been ostracized. Kohberger went to the apartment and tried to support Blank. This occurred toward the end of October. Blank said she has the sense that everything Kohberger does is very calculated. Blank said that Kohberger is intimidated by her friend because she stands up to him. Kohberger wants to be seen as the strongest, smartest, most important person in the room. She said their class has sat for hours in class listening to him arguing with the teacher about his project. Kohberger always wanted to talk about offender decision-making. He gets very defensive when he feels like he is being questioned. On one occasion, Blank had to cut him off when he was going on and on during one of his monologues. Can you imagine? Ann Taylor's like in the room with him, and this is probably what's going on. Kohberger responded that he felt it was rude when someone would interrupt him. Blank said Kohberger would use qualifying words in an effort to hide behind saying offensive things. Blank said one time in November, she found Kohberger in her office and she felt uncomfortable and left. When she came back, Kohberger was in Blank's office with his body turned toward Blank's office. Blank later said Kohberger wasn't talking to her about anything important. She said when she came back, he asked where she had been, and she told him it was none of his business. Blank said Kohberger had bloody knuckles at the time. She said the wounds were bad. Blank said Kohberger recently started wearing a giant puffy jacket, even in class, and she found this odd. Blank said Kohberger said if he were ever to have a sexual partner, they would have to have no physical or mental disabilities, and they would have to be straight and the opposite of gender nonconforming. Blank discussed her beliefs that school resource officers were used to discriminate against minority populations in high schools. Blank said Kohberger disagreed and denied there are inequalities and said everyone was equal. Blank felt he was perpetuating the same myths she was trying to bring up. Blank said people in the program thought he may have autism. She thought Kohberger was a narcissist, and she said he was a vegan. She said that Kohberger knew that she was married and she had brought her husband to a get-together for barbecue, and her husband and Kohberger had a discussion at the barbecue. Her husband said after that discussion, he didn't like Kohberger and wanted her to be careful around him. She saw him on a daily basis, and he never displayed empathy toward another person. She was unaware of any reason for Kohberger to travel to Moscow, any other local town in the area. She had heard that Kohberger was into boxing as a hobby. She said when she first heard of the homicides in this case, she wondered if it could have been him. This was another person. This is the second person who wondered about it. She said that Kohberger was the only student in the class that believed in the death penalty. So they've got this class. He's the only one who believes in the death penalty. He asked her if her 12-year-old daughter was raped and murdered, if she would support the death penalty. Blank noticed that Kohberger was regularly late for classes where a female was instructing and rarely when a male was instructing. She said that on one occasion, he expressed to females in the class that once he was in the job market, they would be screwed in competing for a job against him. She said she wanted to think he was just socially inept, but after knowing him, she believes that Kohberger always thinks he's the smartest person in the room and has expressed resentment or jealousy at their successes. He's always the first person to express his support of police. She again mentioned her and Kohberger's disagreement about the value of school resource officers in schools. She believed that he asked after his arrest if anybody else was arrested was an effort to throw off the cops because she didn't believe he had any friends. She said she had not heard Kohberger discussing knives or how to cover your tracks at a crime scene. She said Kohberger had discussed theoretically about sexual burglars. She said Kohberger is very nosy and tries to look at what other people are texting. And she said her friend had Kohberger over to her apartment on one occasion and told Blank that she thought Kohberger had gone through her medicine cabinet. She said she had not heard that Kohberger had talked about offenders studying victims' behavior before committing a crime. She suggested we speak with Blank because Blank felt Kohberger would have discussed his interests in studying violent sexual crimes. This person they're interviewing said that Kohberger committed these homicides because he wanted to know what it felt like to commit these crimes in relation to his studies. And ultimately, if he could get away with the crimes, further supporting his belief that he was smarter than others. She said committing these crimes and his need to control others is consistent with his personality. I find it really interesting. I don't know about you guys. I'm looking at your comments. We're going to shout out the new members at the end here, guys. This next one, I think you're going to really be interested in. I'm kind of trying to skip over some of the things that maybe aren't as, you know, some of the, I mean, these are very detailed reports. These are really detailed reports. Reports are typically very detailed, but I feel like these are very, I mean, they probably went through these interviews with a fine-tooth comb. They handed over all of the audio to the defense. This is a big case, right? They wanted to dot all their I's and cross all their T's. They didn't want Ann Taylor to say, well, you gave me the audio when they get up on the stand, but in your report, you didn't say this or you didn't say that. So, I mean, they're like, body, bada, 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 bada. And I mean, they go through line by line what each of these people said. They were probably told, you make sure this is a death penalty case with 4 kids who've been murdered. Your reports better be clean. Everybody's reports, button it up. All right, moving on. We already know Kohberger likes dogs, right? He was worried about his parents and his dog when he got arrested. He kept asking, is my dog okay? Are my parents okay? You know. So here we are talking to another student. This was a PhD student. Names redacted, of course. This person said she met him at a barbecue that the department had in August at somebody's house. This is the second time we're hearing about the barbecue. She said that Kohberger asked her where she lived and what kind of dog she owns. That's super interesting to me. Really interesting to me. Because if you're fascinated with burglary type crimes and you're a sexual burglar, are you asking this woman because she fits your profile, where she lives, so you can case her house, and what kind of dog she owns. Because you want to know, oh, like, does she have a German Shepherd? Does she have a Rottweiler? Does she have a poodle? Does she have a lab? Labs are friendly. I mean, are you gonna go try to break into somebody's house who has a Rottweiler? I think not. Are you gonna go try to break into somebody's house who might have a doodle puppy? Probably. Because you can control that dog. Kohberger liked to talk about sexual burglary because that was his field of study. He was interested in the emotions of what it felt like when committing a crime. He said that by October, said that by October, Kohberger was having issues with other students in their PhD cohort and that he was talking to her more in her office. She described having to clean up a mess he and his fellow teacher's assistant had created working for Blank. Blank described conversations she had with Kohberger related to their studies of violent offenders. This included areas of study like sexual burglary, sexual assault, and forensic awareness. He talked about different emotions that violent offenders might have. He discussed how offenders might avoid getting caught. Kohberger asked her if she was single, and she discussed her relationship with her partner. He asked about other friends of hers and if she was interested in getting together outside of school. She said she wasn't interested. She said she had told him she had been blank, and he stated that he did not date broken women. Bryan Kohberger told this woman, who I believe, and I could be wrong about this, I think this woman probably told him she was the victim of sexual assault. And his response was, I don't date broken women. That should tell you something right there. I mean, he doesn't date any women. Let's just be clear about that. Referring to the Moscow homicides, Kohberger had stated that whoever committed the homicides must have been pretty good. This conversation occurred approximately 3 weeks after the homicides. They discussed the idea that students were getting ready to leave for winter break right after when the homicides occurred, and that this timing made it a good choice by the murderer. So I always kind of thought there was kind of a school of thought thinking that, oh, it was the night of the big game. The cops will be tied up with other stuff. They'll be busy with drunk kids. Sneak in, sneak out. I'm going to read that to you one more time. This is 3 weeks after the murders. They discussed the idea that the students were getting ready to leave for the winter break right after when the homicides occurred, and that this timing made it a good choice by the murderer. So in Bryan Kohberger's mind, he's saying this being close to Thanksgiving that was the reason for that timing, because the kids were all getting ready to go home. They wouldn't be around. Now, granted, I was there the first week of December. The murders were November 13th. The kids would have been going home for Thanksgiving, but they still had to come back for finals. There were still classes going on the week of December 5th. I think that was finals week. But then, they let the kids go home and do their stuff remotely. Kohberger told her he had attended blank and described it as a small rural college in Pennsylvania. He advised that he had been taught by police officers. Kohberger stated that whoever committed the Moscow homicides had committed the must have been pretty. Oh, so sorry, guys. He said whoever committed the homicides must have been pretty good. We already went over that. I apologize. Did they put that in there twice? No, I read it twice. I apologize. Sorry about that. I lost my space. I lost my place. I apologize. Kohberger discussed liking to hang out in the forest. He found this so-and-so found this odd because of the lack of forests in the area and said Kohberger never discussed knives with her. She said she made a few complaints about his behavior and she'd been directed to copy her complaints to the blank. She was reluctant to do this because she had not had good experiences with the blank in the past, and she said Kohberger was insulted that the department had brought on 2 women to fix his grading work as a TA for blank. After the homicides occurred, she said he had a few scrapes right now. The statement was made at the Christmas party. Oh, I'm so sorry. After the homicides occurred, Kohberger said he had a few scrapes right now. The statement was made at the Christmas party. She noticed that after the homicides, Kohberger was at the office more. She observed him in the office often, and she assumed he was coming back for the spring semester because he had asked about a theory class that they would take in the spring. She didn't observe anything specifically about Kohberger that pointed to the homicides besides his focus on policing and comments about women having a harder time getting a job as a professor, especially when he hit the job market because he was going to be a hot commodity. Blank said Kohberger had conflict with Blank, questioning her immigration status and insinuating he was superior to her in his research abilities, and said Kohberger was always late when there were female instructors. Blank said female students, Blank, had a whiteboard in their office where they kept track of the number of times when Kohberger was late to class, when female instructors were presenting, or when he would cut off a female when she was speaking. Blank said Kohberger was a vegan, a strong Catholic, and he did not drink. Blank did not recall Kohberger having disparaging comments about members of the Greek system. She said that Kohberger enjoyed conflict and was disparaging toward women. Blank described an outburst Kohberger had regarding a grade he had received from Blank. Blank said in the approximately 40 times she'd been around Kohberger, she had never observed him exhibit empathy toward others. Blank said Kohberger did not like the fact that she discounted the offender in studying sexual assault cases. He said she was being dismissive of the offender. He thought she should be focusing on the offender and what they left behind. He thought the offender had a stronger impact on the crime rather than the victim. She said he thought he was dismissing what she was doing just to argue. She said he was dismissive toward women and not men. It did not cross her mind that Kohberger may have been responsible for the Moscow murders. Blank said Kohberger always seemed reclusive. She said he didn't get the hint that she wanted him to leave when he was in her office. She said she had to leave her office in order to get him to leave her office. In reference to the Moscow homicides, He would say that it was horrible. In discussing whether the murderer would be caught, he said maybe it was a one and done type thing. She said Kohberger sometimes discussed the evidence left behind at crime scenes and how an offender might mitigate against that by wearing gloves. These statements were related to her research work and not specific to the Moscow homicides. She said he did not discuss vehicles, surveillance, or weapons that could be used, but did talk about the time of day that offenders might choose. She talked about how there were conversations about how Kohberger might be an incel, an involuntary celibate. In relation to his Reddit page and his confrontation with Blank, said Kohberger had a bad interaction regarding a front office undergrad staffer named Blank. Blank said students were told not to leave Blank alone with Kohberger. 3 female students from the 101 class, where Kohberger was a TA, told Blank that Kohberger was an awkward guy who would hang around and try to contribute to conversations that he was not a part of. Blank recalled one of these students was named Blank and said no one wanted to talk to Kohberger or hang around him based on how he talks to women and treats women. People in the department thought he was a possible future rapist. Blank said she would not have pegged Kohberger for committing the Moscow homicides. So people in the department believed that Bryan Kohberger, the way that he acted and talked to women, was a possible future rapist. So now I guess you can see why Ann Taylor was so concerned about any of this being used as aggravating factor evidence in a possible penalty phase. And he thought the Moscow murders were horrible. And Bryan Kohberger does not date broken women. Bryan Kohberger doesn't date women at all. They won't have anything to do with him. I mean, it's really sad. In some respects, I'm kind of like, I mean, what was like grade school like for him? And we heard he was kind of like bullied in high school and stuff like that or whatever. He was overweight. I mean, it's very sad. It's very sad to me. It makes me sad if anybody is bullied. But it's like, I'm thinking back to the very formative years, kindergarten, preschool, like that's where you like really can shape with a really nurturing environment. I mean, a lot of it's nature, right? A lot of it's biology or whatever, but you can really shape how a child develops with love and care. And I'm not saying his parents weren't loving and caring. They may very well have been. But I'm just kind of wondering to myself what was going on. I mean, I don't blame any of these people. Who on earth would be like sitting in a classroom with somebody, even if you thought they were a weird dude and sexist and inappropriate, and be like, this horrific crime happens 15 minutes from you and you're like, "Oh my God, I think that Kohberger guy did it." I mean, I don't blame any of these people. Like, they couldn't have known. They just think they've got some jerk on their hands. I'm just taking a little pause, guys. I need some water. I feel like I need a commercial break. I'm not laughing. I'm just saying, like, I'm thirsty. I've been reading to you for a while. All right, guys. I have some stuff to tell you. And then we're going to maybe wrap things up, but I have a few things more to tell you. It was reported the other night that Bryan Kohberger said, "Kaylee, I'm here for you." I believe that was an error. I believe people misread that in the reports. I went through the reports and I read that an officer who processed the crime scene wrote that in his report on December 6th. He was a detective. He wrote this, and I can find the page number for you so you can actually see it yourself. He was recalling what Blaker, one of the people, told him. I don't see anywhere in these reports where Dylan Mortensen said to the police that the male voice said, "Kaylee, I'm here for you." So I think that was misread. I'm going to go back and triple check through the reports, but I believe that was a mistake. I believe people read that and took that as Dylan saying that, but it was actually a CSI processing the scene detective recounting what he said Blaker told him in his report. Number one. Number two, they interviewed Xana's mom about Ann Taylor being her lawyer. They showed her a picture of Ann Taylor. She said, "That's not my lawyer." They explained to her that Ann Taylor was the chief public defender for Kootenai County and that her name would be on the paperwork that she had regarding her court case. But she said, that's not my lawyer. And Xana's mom felt really bad because she felt like there had been a misunderstanding and she believed Ann Taylor was her lawyer. So somebody from Ann Taylor's public defender office, Ann Taylor was like the big boss. Ann Taylor was not representing. She was not the lawyer, but her office was representing Xana's mom. And then Xana's mom felt really bad about this whole misunderstanding. So Xana's mom, poor woman who's struggling with addiction, is, being blasted all over the TV as some woman is in the throes of addiction, battling addiction like nothing else, it's just so horrible. And it's hard. Heroin, fentanyl addiction's horrible. Opioid addiction. And she's led to believe Ann Taylor's her lawyer and believes she's her lawyer. Plus, she's lost her daughter and she's grieving. And then it comes out that Ann Taylor was not her lawyer. It was a lawyer in Ann Taylor's public defender office who was her lawyer, and she felt bad about that. That's number 2. That's something else I found. Another Ted Bundy potential connection that's been pointed out to me that I want to bring to your attention right now. I got an email today from somebody. Remember yesterday, we've heard Bryan Kohberger had called his mother and mom and dad, who he called constantly throughout the day and texted, very demanding of his parents. Call me now. Mother, where's father? Father, why is mother not answering? Bryan, I'll call you at 5:30. Now? No, I'll call you at 5:30. Being tucked into bed at night. But Bryan, go to bed. Mother, father, this whole thing. Obviously, a lot of people call their mom and dad mother and father. I don't. It was always mom and dad. If I called my mom mother, it was, and they said Bryan Kohberger had this like oddly formal way of speaking. If I call my mom mother, it's because I'm being sarcastic with her. But, you know, he's who he is. It was pointed out to me today in an email from a viewer that another person called his, who he thought were his parents, mother and father, and that was Ted Bundy. This is from Ann Rule's book. Ann Rule was a friend of Ted Bundy. She did not know he was a serial killer, but they worked together at a crisis hotline, and she later wrote a book about him. Ted Bundy's mother gave birth to him in like a place for unwed mothers. And when she brought him home to Philadelphia as a little baby, Ted Bundy thought his biological mother was his sister. And his grandparents, he was told to call them mother and father. Is this another Ted Bundy connection to Bryan Kohberger? Is this why he called them mother and father? I don't know, but it was brought to my attention today in an email from a viewer from Oklahoma, and I thought it was interesting. Eleanor, this is his biological mother. Eleanor took her son back to her parents' home in Philadelphia and began a hopeless charade. As the baby grew, he would hear Eleanor referred to as his older sister and was told to call his grandparents mother and father. Already showing signs of brilliance, the slightly undersized little boy, whose crop of curly brown hair gave him a fawn-like appearance, did as he was told, and yet he sensed that he was living a lie. Ted adored his grandfather, Cowell. He identified with him, respected him, and clung to him in times of trouble, but as he grew older, it was clear that remaining in Philadelphia would be impossible. There was a contingent of Cowells living in Washington state, and they offered to take Eleanor and the boy in if they came west. To ensure Ted's protection against prejudice, Eleanor, who would henceforth be called Louise, went to court on October 6, 1950 in Philadelphia and had Ted's name legally changed to Theodore Robert Nelson. It was a common name, one that should give him anonymity and that would not draw attention to him when he began school. She then later met somebody named Johnny Culpepper Bundy at a Methodist church. Louise did. So that's where Ted Bundy got the name Bundy. I'm like, is this why he called them mother and father? Or maybe it's just that formal. I don't know. We've got some new members tonight, guys. I want to shout everybody out and thank the people who have purchased memberships is very sweet. Jack Collins, thank you so much for purchasing memberships for people. Our new members are the Off-White Lotus, Solangel M, welcome. Jen and Toxic, welcome. Judgerson, welcome. And Lynette Eves. Texas Annie Soundwave Weaves and Designs received a membership by Allie. Thank you, Allie, for all the new memberships. I'm going to pop these up. I'm doing the best I can, guys, here. Sorry about that. Burning_Queen. Thank you. You're welcome as a new member. I apologize. Triple L, welcome. Laura became a new member. Thank you, Laura. Welcome. Scrolling through here, guys. Scrolling through as quickly as I can. I do this all here by myself for now. Jan Price, thank you for the super sticker. It's very sweet of you. Thank you. Stephanie Hatfield, welcome as a new member. Thank you so much. I'm scrolling through, guys, shouting out all the new members. Esther Bunny, do you think he committed murder before? Thank you for the super chat. No, I don't. I think this was his first time. If he did, it was probably on an animal, but he's a vegan and he's got that whole thing going on. So I don't know if he would have killed an animal or not. Janet Brissett, welcome as a new member. Thank you so much. I thought you were a member before, but maybe you just rejoined, but thank you. Tier Talk, from prison to true crime. Thank you for the super chat. Great content. I think you will enjoy my coverage as well. My channel provides a perspective from those that work in the correction system, and we know the criminal mind. Thank you. I will check it out. That is very sweet. Thank you for the super chat. Scrolling through, guys. Scrolling through. Trying to get to everybody here. Edward Wood, thank you. Thank you so much for the memberships you sponsored and purchased. Thank you for the super chat. These documents are amazing. They're very detailed. The Idaho State Police did a fantastic job in their documentation. They were very thorough. And there's a lot more to come, guys. There's no way I can get through them all tonight. That's for sure. So we'll revisit. I promise you that. The Tier Talk, from prison to true crime. Thanks for the other super chat. That's very generous. Maybe one day I can be considered a resource for you. I'd be honored to share in these great discussions. I think I provide a unique perspective that can balance what's currently out there. It's solid. Be an honor. I think you meant would, but that's okay. Autocorrect might have gotten you. That's very kind. Thank you. I will reach out. Thank you so much. It's very sweet. Thank you, CC1111, for the super sticker. It's very generous. Thank you. My goodness. I'm kind of overwhelmed by everybody's generosity tonight. It's very sweet. Florence Nightingale, appreciate you going through these, and I really like your insights. This is so informative. Thank you for the super chat, Florence. That's very sweet of you. Thank you so much. Shelly Steert, thank you for the super chat, and thank you, Anjanette, for such an in-depth presentation. Thank you. I appreciate that. Sorry if it was a little scrambly, you guys. I just wanted to hit I didn't want to miss any good nuggets in there for you. Snazzy Trinkets, thank you for the super chat. Please take care of yourself. This is such an emotionally heavy case to follow. Thank you for reporting with compassion and empathy. That's very sweet. Thank you so much. I do my best to take care of myself. Anytime I feel upset about this or anything, I just think to myself, I am not one of the families involved in this. So I think about how fortunate I am. Guys, we will revisit. There is much more to talk about. And I'll try to clean up our presentation at all. Again, thank you so much. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the thumbs up. If you're watching on replay, thank you so much. And we will do this again sometime soon as I go through more of the documents. Thank you to the docket, Melmac, Monty, and Mo for moderating. And thank you to you all. Have a great night and take care of yourselves, and have a great Sunday, a great Saturday, no matter where you're watching from. I know if some of you are like in Australia and stuff, it's already Sunday. So have a great weekend, and I will see you back here again sometime very soon. Until next time, bye-bye.